Howdy everybody, hope you're doing well today. I'm Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist, Bob Langston from the North Carolina Zoo, thanking you once again for letting me come in and spend just a little bit of time with you today. It is mid-August. My shirt has already given me away that it is indeed very, very hot and very, very muggy out here. So something we may not necessarily be thinking about is the winter time. Some of our friends are very, very keen and they're already thinking ahead to the winter. And I'm referring here to birds, specifically migratory birds. We use the term migratory or migration when we talk about birds that live in warmer climates, places that are warmer or more temperate during the summertime. But when it gets cold up there, their food supply goes away, so they have to go south to climates where their food is much more plentiful. So often they are following the food, they're following the climates. And birds have to pay a lot of attention to that because they are what we call endotherms. That means they regulate their own temperature like we do. In the wintertime, we'll put on a jacket. Birds don't have that opportunity. In the wintertime, we'll stop eating things like the fresh fruits and vegetables that come from our farmer's market, and we'll have to come up with a more seasonal diet. So that's what we do, that's how we adapt. Birds don't do that, they migrate. Now this time of year, in mid-August, some of the earliest migrants are actually starting their migration south. And some of them happen to be the smallest. Imagine a tiny little bird that's actually smaller than my thumb, and a bird that is so tiny, it only weighs a nickel, the same as this nickel. It's about 4 to 6 grams of weight. It's a tiny little bird. And of course, I'm talking about hummingbirds. So as hummingbirds are starting to make their way south, the ones we see the most of are ruby-throated hummingbirds. Emerald green on the back, the males are, and they have a nice iridescent or shiny metal-looking patch of feathers on their neck. The females don't have that, and you'll get a chance to see what some of them look like here in just a few minutes. As they make their migration, one of the things we can do that makes life a lot easier for them is let them know there are places that you can get food along the way. Often we think of hummingbirds as feeding only on nectar. Nectar is a sugary, watery type of secretion that's usually found down inside the bloom of certain flowers. So planting flowers in our yard that actually bloom in the fall, late summer, fall of the year, gives them something to eat along the way. It's not the only thing they eat. They also are insectivores and use the sugar to get fueled up so they can go out and do their job eating insects. So we have insects this time of year, we have flowers. Once you get them into your yard, you do need to advertise. None of us could find our favorite restaurants if it weren't for billboards. So I put some billboards in the yard. We have these absolutely gorgeous, huge, tall zinnias that we planted this year. Red is a color that attracts hummingbirds a lot, and here you can see we have lots of different colors, shades of reds and oranges and pinks. Those bring them in, and then I use a series of feeders. Feeders in the yard, it's really, really simple. It's nothing but sugar water. Now, I do not buy the commercially prepared stuff that has the red dye in it. I don't like that at all. I make up my own, and I'll give you a little tip. The metric system can be your friend in this particular instance. This is a 1-liter water bottle, and I use it to mix up my hummingbird nectar. It's real simple. It's a 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. So they're 5 equal parts. And metric system being set up in 10s and 100s. So this one is a 1 liter or 1,000 milliliters. So I can fill it up to this line, the 200 milliliter line with sugar, and then fill it up the rest of the way with warm water, shake it up, and I have a liter of nectar. I've just recently changed out the feeders in the yard. I used to use one that had the upright bin kind of like this, and in the fall of the year, we have this problem, yellow jackets. So when you have the feeder like that, it keeps the nectar level right up at the feeding holes. And unfortunately, it draws in yellow jackets. And when you get too many yellow jackets, the hummingbirds won't feed from your feeders. So I've changed over and I use these. They're called saucer or dish type feeders. Each of these has 3 holes where the birds can come and they can stick their beak in there and drink from the nectar. The 4th hole is actually a fill hole. I have these spaced out across the yard. So let's take a look at some of the hummingbirds that come and visit. Look at those wings beating. They can go up to 80 beats per second. This little female may be a first-year bird because ruby-throated hummingbirds are in fact summer residents. They're found right here in central North Carolina. So this one may not necessarily be getting started on her migration. She's just feeding up and trying to get a little nutrition. As mentioned, they are nectar feeders. The nectar is a sugary secretion of the flowers, or in this case it's sugar water in the feeder. That provides carbs and some quick energy, but then they need to eat insects for fats and protein. Now, apparently they're not too fond of those ants that you see crawling up and down the little hangar there for my feeder. Now, their migration is pretty amazing. They'll fly down to the southern part of the United States and hang out on the Florida and Gulf coasts of Mississippi and Alabama. Some of them actually go on down into Central America, and that means they have to cross the Gulf of Mexico. But now, warmer climates in the United States actually mean that some of the birds are staying a little bit further north. This absolutely gorgeous male ruby-throated hummingbird shows off a couple of interesting features about these birds. Notice the feathers under his chin on the bottom of his neck. Depending upon how the light strikes the feathers, they can either appear black or they can take on the characteristic ruby red color for which the species is named. But as they come and they drink nectar from flowers, nectar is just basically a sugary secretion down inside most flowers, and it tricks animals like hummingbirds and bees and butterflies into getting a drink, and they pick up pollen along the way. In this case, the hummingbirds will get it on their feathers and carry it from flower to flower to flower. Now watch his tongue. He'll flip it out a couple of times, and if you watch long enough, you'll see that his tongue is as long as his beak is. This is a really cool thing about hummingbirds. I mentioned that they are insectivores, and that's one of the additional reasons to really like these birds, because the insects they really like to eat are mosquitoes and gnats, insects that we aren't particularly fond of. During their regular course of daily activities, these birds have an amazing metabolism. It's very, very high. They need to be eating constantly, either nectar or insects. Their hearts can beat at about 500 beats per minute when they're sitting still. It can double when they're flying. And overnight, they could actually lose 10% of their body weight. So that's why they have to eat quite a lot. Imagine that diet plan. Wouldn't that be great? In the wintertime, the ones that have decided that they're going to stay here and that they're not going to migrate can actually go into a state called torpor. Their body metabolism will slow down to about 10% of what it normally does, and they don't have to eat nearly as much. It's great. They'll perch on a limb, and the way that birds' toes and legs are built, as long as there's weight on their body and it forces their toes to curl up so that they don't lose their grip on whatever branch or perch they're sitting upon. It's really kind of a cool thing. It really is that simple. Put out a billboard, that neon sign that lets the hummingbirds know this is a feeding friendly yard. You can come here and you can get something to eat. We do that with the flowers. We put up the feeders that are largely red, and they're the dish type feeders, so we don't have as much problem with yellow jackets and other insects, and we have hummingbirds. It's a good opportunity for them to stop on their way south, but here's the crazy thing. Many of these hummingbirds never complete the migration. Many of them will stick around. They don't have insects, and they don't have an awful lot of nectar in the wintertime to feed upon, so I kind of leave my feeders out all winter long. For the North Carolina Zoo, I'm Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist. Please feel free to come visit with us. The North Carolina Zoo is now open to the public. We still have our cap on the number of people who can come in per day, so you do need to buy your tickets in advance, and you do need to make a reservation for what time you're able to come into the gate. You can find all that information on our website at www.nczoo.org. So please, plan a visit. The weather will cool off very much. It'll cool off shortly. Once the weather does cool off, it's a wonderful time to come to the North Carolina Zoo. In the meantime, get outside, check out those hummingbirds and the other animals that are hanging out in the fall of the year. They're changing their behaviors, even though it may not feel like it's getting very cool. For the North Carolina Zoo, again, I'm Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist. Thank you very kindly, and I hope to see you again shortly. Bye now, and take care.